So, welcome. Welcome to everyone. Welcome to you as attendees. Welcome to the many Concerned Friends members and volunteers. We have some board members here, and a special welcome and thank you, of course, to our panelists, which I will, of course, properly introduce in a moment. But before I do, I wanted to just take a moment to do an acknowledgement. Concerned Friends, as an organization, is a province-wide organization. So we recognize that our work takes place on the traditional Indigenous territories across the province. There's 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory that is now called Ontario. And we know that our community, our work, our advocacy extends to the far reaches of these ancestral grounds, inhabited by, protected, and cared for by generations of Indigenous peoples. I, myself, live and work in Toronto, Treaty 13 territory, and the ancestral territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy of the Six Nations, and the Huron-Wendat. One of the things that I like to share, because it is meaningful for me, and as a land acknowledgement should be meaningful and individual, is that Toronto is actually under the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt. And that's an agreement that is between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. And it signifies an important value that really resonates with me, which is reciprocity. And that means reciprocity with the land and water, with one another, and within our communities. And I acknowledge, of course, that Toronto is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and I'm grateful for the opportunity tonight to come together with you all to ensure that our elders are protected and cared for in the way that they have so generously protected and cared for us. And that is what reciprocity is. So, having said that, our wonderful program for tonight is that we will have each of our panelists share for a few minutes their vision for the future of long-term care in Ontario. They're going to speak, sort of in terms of their aspirations, what they see as being important, and we will hopefully learn from that. Then we are going to have an opportunity to do a few rounds, I hope, of panel discussion with specific questions that will be directed to individual panelists, and we'll get to hear from them on that. And then I hope that we'll have a little bit of time to perhaps grab a couple of questions from the chat. But like I said, you're welcome to put them in there. If we don't get to them tonight, we will make sure that we report back in some way. And then finally, we'll do a wrap up. And that's our program for tonight. So I'd like to provide a little bit of context around this event and around Concerned Friends and around Long-Term Care Awareness Day, so that you understand kind of the positioning of this and why we wanted to initiate this conversation with these wonderful people. Concerned Friends is an organization that has been around for the last 40 years, doing advocacy and direct support to seniors in advancing the health and well-being of those living in long-term care homes across Ontario. As an organization, we are volunteer run. Carol, who you probably saw let you in, is our only sort of paid staff, and we rely on probably over 1,500 hours a year of in-kind time and support and expertise and talent from our volunteers to coordinate these things. We saw a lot of things happen as a result of the pandemic. It certainly spotlit so many of the issues and needs within the long-term care sector as a whole. Needs all over, needs in terms of staffing, needs in terms of infrastructure, needs in terms of resident care. And so because of that, we decided to initiate Long-Term Care Awareness Day and create an opportunity to again bring attention and awareness to long-term care, but also invite others who are not directly affected by or not directly involved in the long-term care sector to also become educated and learn and value this important sector and to work toward change for the system as a whole. So today, November 22nd, this is our second annual, is really meant to serve as a platform to elevate awareness, to talk about long-term care, and be sure that we are all working toward a system that offers dignity, respect, and quality of care, of life, of experience for all who are living in, working in, and supporting long-term care. So that is Long-Term Care Awareness Day. And tonight, I'm very pleased that we could host this event. Tonight, we have with us Dave Stanyon, President of the Residents' Council at Kensington Gardens. We have Melissa McVie, Director of Communications from Ontario Association of Residents' Councils. Sam Peck, Executive Director of Family Councils Ontario. Crystal Rosewell, Program and Support Services Supervisor at Trillium Manor. Sara Muylaert, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Sara. Behavioural Supports Ontario, PSW, Strathmere Lodge, and Dan Levitt, Chief Executive Officer at Kin Village in BC. So we actually have some representation out of province, but we're very excited to incorporate that and Dan's vision and into what we are going to discuss tonight. So to begin, I'd like to turn things over to Dave and Melissa, and if you wouldn't mind just letting me take a minute to properly introduce. So Dave is president of the Residents' Council at Kensington Gardens in Toronto and is actively involved on his home's Continuous Quality Improvement Committee. He proudly serves as a member of the Ontario Association of Residents' Councils, Provincial Resident Advisory Group, the REAL Group, and welcomes opportunities to share his lived experiences through discussions with long-term care stakeholders, government partners, students, and fellow residents. And co-presenting with him is Melissa. Melissa is the Director of Communications with the Ontario Association of Residents' Councils. Guided by a desire to advocate, empower, and mobilize change, Melissa has worked in long-term care for over a decade, gaining progressive experience in frontline and leadership roles before joining the Ontario Association of Residents' Councils in 2018, and she considers the opportunity to partner with residents the best part of her role. So I am going to pass the mic over to Dave and Melissa.
Thanks so much, Crystal, and good evening, everyone. On behalf of Dave and myself, thank you for the warm welcome, and thank you to Concerned Friends for including us in as part of this very important panel discussion tonight, and for those in the audience for their interest, their care, and their commitment. When Dave and I first found out that we were up first to speak in tonight's lineup of esteemed panelists and guests, I think we were both admittedly a bit nervous, mostly me, I'm sure. Dave is a calming presence, so it's always so fun to partner together. But then we quickly realized how important it is to always prioritize, lift, and leverage resident voices and resident lived experiences. And we really became excited then to help to set a resident-centered tone for our conversation this evening. And we really can't begin to envision the future of long-term care without having residents at the table. So with Ontario's vision to modernize long-term care, residents are ready, willing, and able to work collaboratively with government and home operators to really influence change. I can't emphasize enough that residents want to be part of the solution. The Ontario Association of Resident Councils, which is a bit of a mouthful, and I know we use too many acronyms in healthcare and long-term care, but so we are known more commonly by this acronym OARC. And we were formed by a small group of residents back in 1981. And these residents wanted a united, strong voice to help advocate for positive change. And over the years, residents have helped to influence and bring about many important changes, including the legislative requirement for every long-term care home to have an established and well-supported resident council, and they contributed to the evolution of the Residents' Bill of Rights, just to name a few. And over 4 decades later, residents continue to play an integral role when it comes to guiding and informing OARC's work and our priorities at both the governance and at the operational levels. Everything that we do is done alongside and in consultation with residents. The impact of OARC's work can be seen and felt at both the long-term care home level, so kind of that micro level, and at the government and at the systems levels. And so OARC is engaged in the delivery of education and coaching support with residents and teams sitting knee to knee in the long-term care homes. We help with relationship building and problem solving, providing tools and strategies to strengthen resident council operations and provide opportunities for meaningful resident engagement. And then really through these interactions, we're able to hear and learn firsthand about the needs, the challenges, and the opportunities that exist in long-term care. And armed with this information, we're able to work in collaboration proactively with our government partners and other long-term care stakeholders to infuse this resident feedback to inform policies and practice. Our vision at OARC is that every resident shapes the place they call home. And I'd like to invite Dave to share what this means to him.
Thanks, Melissa. Now, I've only been in long-term care for 3 years now, but I'm encouraged by what I've seen and the changes I've seen and been a part of so far. Stakeholders from the Ministry of Long-Term Care down to the very home levels are actively seeking not only residents' opinions and thoughts, but also encouraging their active participation in the committees. I mentioned in my highlights that I'm a member of the Continuous Quality Improvement here at Kensington Gardens, and it's a good way for me to understand just how the operation works. Residents want and need to be involved in every step of the way, from home design right down to how their home is run. Some homes now even include residents in their hiring process, which is important, not only so that our homes become a desirable place to live and call home, but it's also a desirable place to work. And it can't be just a check the box exercise. Oh, we've asked a resident, done that. No, there is no such thing as a typical resident anymore. They're getting younger. We just had a recent admission here at Kensington that was only 42. So in a lot of cases, they're getting younger, and we're seeing a broad spectrum of cognitive abilities. The image of all long-term care residents being fragile and frail is a bit outdated. It's imperative that there's a range of resident voices at the table. Any last words, Melissa?
I just want to emphasize that OARC's vision for the future of long-term care is that, as you've said, long-term homes are viewed and experienced as exactly that, as home, as vibrant, desirable places to live and work, and really as an option, a viable option along a continuum of housing options for people to age within their communities. While the provision of excellent care is important to residents, the quality of living is equally, if not more important from the resident's perspective. And as one resident shared with us, care is the given in long-term care. Let's focus on the living. This involves striking an important balance between risk management decisions and quality of life decisions, consulting with residents each and every step of the way at every level. Using person-centered, affirming language is also important as we look to the future. We look forward to a time that when we talk about the size of a long-term care home, we talk about the number of people who live there, not just the number of beds or the number of units it has. System and home level transformation can only be successful if residents are viewed as partners, with their feedback, ideas, and experiences being proactively sought and used as a roadmap for positive change in the long-term care sector. And I believe, Dave, I'm going to leave it with you for the last word.
Thanks again, Melissa. Well, somebody once observed that to be really good at something, you need to practice for 10,000 hours. If you do the math, that's only 417 days. You know, I'm an expert now at being a resident. I've been here for 3 years, and we're all experts. So the message is clear. If you have a question that concerns a resident, ask a resident. It's that simple.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for sharing that. I have to say, we wanted to really start this session, this discussion, this whole event with the resident perspective and voice. And I'm very pleased, Dave, that you could be here and bring that to bear. So thank you so much. And Melissa as well. Your note, your message, that care is a given and let's focus on the living really resonates with me as well. And I think that will be a big takeaway for many from this session. So thank you again. Okay, I'm very pleased to now introduce Sam Peck, who is the Executive Director of Family Councils Ontario. In that role, she focuses on building and maintaining relationships with funders, stakeholders, and interconnected organizations to carry out activities that support Family Councils Ontario's mission and developing strategies that enable the organization to create positive change within the long-term care sector. So Sam, I would love to hand the mic over to you.
Thanks so much. Yes, I'm Sam Peck. My pronouns are she and her. I'm ED of Family Councils of Ontario, and we're a charitable not-for-profit that supports caregivers to form and maintain effective peer support and advocacy groups within long-term care homes. And like OARC, we work with government and the sector to create a better long-term care system. So it's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. So a best-in-class long-term care system is one we would all be proud of. For everyone on this call, system planners, residents, families, everyone. And it's one that would achieve FCO's vision that people in long-term care have a vibrant experience and the best care. Not just a good experience, but one that's vibrant and really speaks to what Dave spoke about. It'd be based on the values Ontarians hold dear and the best available evidence about not only medical care, but the psychosocial well-being of residents. So what would the system look like? First and foremost, it would be just as in a just culture that focuses on the prevention of harm, on continuous learning, on psychological safety for all, and relationship building among staff members to create well-functioning and strong teams, and between those teams and caregivers and residents. It's a system where we would learn from the pandemic and create a culture where all team members can ask questions, can admit mistakes, and share accountability. We hear time and time again from families that they want staff to be able to ask questions, admit mistakes so they can do better. Of course, avoiding catastrophic mistakes, but the little things, like no one's perfect, and together we can all do better. And it would also be a just system, as in justice. So from the Journal of Law, Medicine, and Ethics, this would be a transformational change to eliminate health inequities and secure distinctively collective interests in access to healthcare and healthy living conditions. So the services provided in long-term care would be equitable, meet the needs of the individual, and we'd have consistency of the levels of care and the quality across the province, no matter where you live. So this would require a few home and systems level changes. Homes would need to be truly home and home-like. What we hear time and time again is residents would want to live in small home units or neighborhoods where they can gather around a dining room table for dinner, where they could participate in preparing food and taking care of the household to the best of their ability. Take some risk, use a kettle or a paring knife, things that we do in our homes that we wouldn't want to give up, that bring us some joy. Food is a big one, connecting with your friends. Residents would be able to make meaningful relationships with their peers and home staff to get to know each other as people, so that you know the people who are in your home. You can make jokes with them, you get to know them. I had electricians here this morning, and they introduced themselves. We got to know each other because they were people in my home. Residents should get the same care. Now, there are homes and organizations that are moving towards a small home, emotion-focused care model, but a best-in-class system would make this the norm. Every resident, caregiver, and staff person would benefit from this. And the system would meaningfully engage and support caregivers in helping to design and implement the system in general and at the home level. Family councils would be desired, supported, and meaningfully engaged by home staff. They'd be seen as the true partners they are. Families and caregivers and councils can participate in quality improvement and in addressing issues and can use their knowledge, skills, and expertise to support the home. But family caregivers would have to be supported in their role and seen as allies and partners. They wouldn't speak over residents, but with the large number of residents living with cognitive changes and needing support to express their wishes, caregivers would be seen as people who can amplify resident voices. And caregivers would be cared for. They'd be given the information they need before their person moves into long-term care and provided with support during the transition. Because cared for caregivers can be amazing partners in care. And homes would be great places to work. I mean, ideally, people would want to work in long-term care. They'd be able to work to their full scope of practice. They'd be compensated fairly for their labor, have time to just spend time with residents, not just focus on tasks, and would be supported to excel in their work, not just work in fear of being in non-compliance with legislation. And we'd value the personhood of everyone, residents, caregivers, staff, volunteers, everyone. We'd create communities where racism, homophobia, transphobia, and other forms of hate are not accepted. And we'd ensure that everyone is safe and able to be their best, fullest self. Ultimately, a world-class system would be founded on evidence-based medical care, equality, justice, and belonging for everyone, and anti-oppressive, anti-colonial, and inclusive practice that center personhood. This is a lot, but it's possible. The current system was created by people, and we can change it into something that makes us all proud. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's possible. Because we can create vibrant and best-in-class long-term care homes that provide exceptional care delivered by people who choose to be there because it's a fantastic place to live, work, and care. It's not easy, but it is possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam, for sharing your vision. I have to say, as you were describing it, I myself found I was thinking about my grandfather who was in care and how much he would have loved what you described, especially the idea of being able to sit down around a dining table and, break bread and wine, so to speak, and really just connect. That was a big part of his experience as a human being on this planet. And I find myself really, thinking that we can aspire to that for sure. And thank you also for mentioning how important it is that we care for caregivers, because the families of those who are in long-term care, especially of residents, for example, who do have various cognitive needs or who have dementia, for example, sometimes we can feel very disconnected from the system and really uncared for. So thank you for mentioning that as well. Okay, and now I'm very pleased to introduce Crystal, my namesake. Crystal is a program and support services supervisor with the Corporation of the County of Simcoe. She creates therapeutic relationships through recreation and promoting leisure activities, leveraging her specialized training in Montessori methods for dementia and palliative care. Her goal as a recreational therapist is to strive to make a difference one individual at a time. So, Crystal, I'm very pleased to pass the mic to you.
Sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I was kind of excited when I heard what the topic was, because honestly, the last couple of years has been more about being in a reaction mode. And so this has been able to get us into a place where we can start to dream about the future again. And, through the COVID years, we heard a lot about confinement syndrome and concerns for, lack of social engagement. And those were really never things that we heard about much outside of the recreation department. So it was kind of neat to see that it was becoming a bigger issue, that other people were becoming aware of it. So my envision for long-term care in the future would be to look at long-term care as more of a community and not a facility. So we're starting to see in long-term care that sometimes there's daycare facilities included. But what if we expanded that to short-term housing solutions for people in need in exchange for volunteer work and them gaining job experience? You know, right now in long-term care, we see a lot of placements that mostly for students that are mostly in the medical fields. But I believe that there's opportunity to expand that and really think outside the box. Things like high school students maybe doing a full credit in a long-term care home, learning lived experience from some of our folks, eating in the dining room with our residents and sharing and engaging social and intellectual levels. You know, we could have culinary students in the kitchen and students in the trades learning about the building systems as well as our medical students. And what if we looked at a model that ensured safety, but allowed people freedom to make risks? So I think Dave and Melissa talked about this a little bit. Just ensuring that we have safe places for people, you know, and allow people freedom within the environment and a lot less locked doors. And we had unrestricted access to the outside. So I know risk is, you know, a huge issue in long-term care, and we're typically always looking to keep people safe. We don't want people to fall and we don't want accidents to happen. But honestly, I believe that we need to allow people to have the right for risk, because everything that we do in our lives involves risk. And so, you know, why don't we allow our high school students to take a resident off the property and go for a walk in the neighborhood? Or why don't we allow a resident to have a sharp knife and help with food prep? Bring them to the boiler room when repairs are being done. Maybe they'd even have some insight for us. Let them be in the kitchen and assist with making meals, or at least watching those meals be made, and help them to be a lot more engaged in their environment. And that kind of brings me to meaningful activities. I think that most people would agree that recreation staff are really great at coming out with a calendar full of fun and activities, you know, that are engaging, but they tend to be more entertainment or diversional type activities. And I really believe that there's a place for those things. But I also think that some of our residents could be doing some more meaningful tasks, some of the things that they would have done, you know, in their life before long-term care, like helping with the laundry or setting tables, clearing the dishes, allowing residents to help with food prep, like I already mentioned. So if we shift it to an environment of encouraging residents to do a little bit more for themselves instead of doing everything for them, I think that we would create a sense of worth and value for them. And on both sides, right? And I know this already happens with care. We encourage residents to do as much as they can for themselves, but to extend that to other tasks. And I think we need to leave people alone when they want to be left alone. I mean, I think we all experience days like that in our lives when we just want a quiet day. And I think that if we provide ways for people to want to be engaged rather than forcing them to be engaged, we're going to have much better results. And I think the key to a lot of this is community and the amount of value that we place on our elders within our culture. It's unlikely that government sources alone will be able to fund long-term care moving forward. But if we were to have more programs in place that interacted with long-term care, like, for example, the schooling, the daycares, like I was talking about, then I think we would, you know, have a little bit of a better chance. I think there's also an opportunity for corporations to get involved through, you know, employee incentives to volunteer and make connections. And I was also thinking about, you know, elementary and high school students, if we made that a part of their regular programming, instead of them calling us up a couple of times a year and saying, oh, we have a special event, we want to do a Halloween parade or something. But if they were engaged with a long-term care home on a regular basis, I think it would change the culture, starting with the youth and starting with the younger generations and moving up through the years, so that we would view our elders in a much different light, really. I think just to close, I'm going to say, you know, I had a family member a few years to say to me, I thought my dad was moving into long-term care to die. And then I found out that really he was moving in to live out his final days in a meaningful way. And I think that's a message that we really need to pass on to the rest of the community. It's not just a bed in long-term care, it's a person that's residing in that bed. So it just gives you a different view of how you look at it all. And, you know, I really want to thank your group for your advocacy, because that's the part that's going to make the difference for the future.
Thank you so much, Crystal. I loved so many of the things that you were sharing. And one thing I will say, your vision for integrating younger people, other generations, those who are obviously in school, really, really connected for me. I have young children who, I want to feel like they are part of a community of many generations and that they can benefit from the stories and the lived experience of those who are older than them and who have experienced different moments of life. But I'll also just share very quickly that as a 15-year-old, I volunteered for a year in a hospice in my community, and it was perhaps one of the most formative and powerful experiences of my life, of my young life. And even to this day, there are so many lessons and just relationships that I built there that I have taken with me, and that's now decades later. So I really appreciate that part of the vision, and I think it's very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Now I'm pleased to invite Sara to share her vision. So Sara is a certified PSW with specialized training in dementia care, responsive behaviors, communication, and palliative care. For the last 9 years, Sara has assisted families and residents in navigating challenges related to responsive behaviors associated with dementia, complex mental health, substance use, and/or other neurological conditions. Her focus is person-centered care to reduce expressions of risk and improve quality of life for residents. So I'm going to pass the mic to you now, Sara.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. Yes, tonight. I feel like we've touched on a lot of the same things, so I feel like I'm going to probably touch on some of the same things, but I feel like long-term care is ever changing, and we're seeing it go in the right direction. It's slow moving, but we are going that way, and every year there's more research going into those gaps in our healthcare system of what we do for long-term care and kind of changing that dynamic. So I specifically work with most dementia patients, but also complex cases. So when I look at my vision for the future, it's how we can help the individuals that have these complex cases, providing them and their families resources to kind of help navigate through these difficult and challenging times where maybe not all long-term care settings are, because they're communal. It can be difficult for those challenging cases where individuals have these behaviors that maybe don't coexist with other residents or individuals. So when I look at it, my vision would be, person-centered care. Let's get to know our residents. Let's do all that we need to kind of know what their past, their history, and then providing them case by case, supplying them the resources. So again, looking at one-on-one companion support for people, that's a huge thing. We are lonely, and there's not enough time for caregivers to provide that. Oftentimes, and we're seeing more enrichment positions in long-term care, which is fantastic, where they're spending those normally 11 to 7 to kind of help with those high need times of loneliness and no visitors and people around to kind of engage and give those meaningful activities, which we've touched on is, not so much the activity, so much we're seeing more need for meaningful activities. So maybe that was cleaning to somebody, maybe that was carpentry or sanding or gardening. And then looking at their individual needs. So is there language barriers? What's their preference? What's the preference for staffing? Their religion, their outings, their food preferences, timing preferences. Let's allow these individuals to decide when they want to be back. When they want to wake up in the morning. I'm sorry, I'm hearing that sound before. I'm not sure how to do it.
I think you're okay. I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I've just seen it pop up there. So and then getting their loved ones and their families involved. I think that's a big part where we miss sometimes is getting them involved to kind of help figure out what we can do for these individuals and having them involved as well. So kind of using that interdisciplinary team. And then education being a big portion. I know we focus on certificates and coming into those roles with the requirements for the role, but also looking at approaches of care, giving staff the tools, the effective tools to help them navigate through behaviors and specialized needs and depression, addiction, and understanding, sometimes we often will have residents that have these responsive behaviors, and educating the family that it's not personal, because sometimes that can go both ways, right? Where the individual is struggling, but so is the family. So can we communicate and help with both ends of it? And then I think the biggest thing is environment and long-term care is, my vision is getting away from that clinical look, the environment, making the tub room more of a spa room, giving those visual cues that make it look more like their home and not so clinical. Yeah, I think that's it.
Well, thank you, Sara, for sharing that vision. I want to just highlight a couple of things that you did say. One of which I think is particularly important, and Concerned Friends does hope to be able to dive into it, in a topic unto itself. But you did mention the fact that there are very personal aspects of all of us as humans that maybe are not at the moment being taken into consideration, and that we hope that that can happen in the future, including things like their language, preferences around that, their religion, any sort of cultural values that they may have that might be important, whether it be relating to food and whatnot. And I think that that is a piece that we can certainly strive to be better and incorporate more of, and that part of your vision really, again, speaks to me again, as my grandfather was someone with severe dementia, but his native language was not English, and as he sort of deteriorated, he went back to his native language, and not one person within his home spoke that language. So that made it exceptionally, challenging for him. So I do hope that that is something that we can consider in the future. And I just want to say the case by case and the customized support piece that you also mentioned, I think, again, resonates with me and with many of the panelists in talking about person-centered care, and really appreciating that, there needs to be more of that direct dialogue. And that is what we hope to see in the future. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, and finally, I'm very pleased to introduce Dan Levitt. So Dan is an elder care leader, speaker, writer, gerontologist, specializing in helping others to create better lives for seniors. And he's also currently CEO of Kin Village in British Columbia. And as part of that, he shepherds the enhancement of housing, social, and care needs for more than 300 older persons living on site, and thousands of community members with community-based programs. As an acclaimed international speaker, his goal is to inspire a new mindset on aging needed to thrive in the 21st century. So Dan, I am excited to hear your vision.
Well, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. I appreciate you including somebody from the other side of the country. I might say that I'm partly from Ontario. My sister was born there. I spent a couple of years working at Baycrest, and I also do a lot of surveying for Accreditation Canada of long-term care homes, in particular in Ontario. So I was there last week and a few times already this year. So thank you very much. I have 5 minutes. 5 slides to show you. So I want to introduce you to my friend. This is Paul Madden. He's 93 years of age. He's a father, he's a builder, he's a curler, he's a gardener. He lives at Kin Village. I'm purposely not calling him a resident. By the regulations or by all those things we say, he's a resident. You might hear people say my residents or our seniors. I don't own him. I don't possess him. I may be responsible for him in some ways for his safety, but really he's a friend. And this is how good a friend he is. He came by my office one day. He says, Dan, I got to show you the garden. He had the local Rotarian Service Club out there doing all the gardening and all the yard cleanup. And then after he organized that, he took them for lunch. And as a thank you, this happened about half a dozen times over the course of the spring and summer and fall. And then as a thank you to the Rotarians, he took them out to our little cafe here, Buenos Dias Cafe in our community center, and bought them lunch. So that's Paul. And like I said, he lives in long-term care. So he, for me, is an exemplary person who I believe is enjoying all the benefits of quality of life that we all kind of take for granted. Next slide. Thank you. So during the pandemic, we basically stripped in long-term care in Canada. We stripped, and Western world pretty much as well. We stripped the rights of older people and their families. I don't know how many rights they actually had during the pandemic. But what we did do is we tried to work around them as much as we could. We didn't want to become wardens. We wanted to continue to be leaders. So what we did, something simple, was we wanted to connect family members with their loved ones who lived in care. And this is a woman who lives in a memory care neighborhood with another 19 other people. And you can see her reaction when she's visiting with her daughter. And there's no medication that we could give her that would give her that expression. This is the excitement that she is seeing, looking at a screen and not expecting to see someone she recognizes. And they had a lovely visit. And it was one of those magical moments that we caught on camera. Next slide. So as you're talking about small homes and talking about reinventing the nursing home and using the nursing home on purpose, this is a home. This happens to be in Boston. If you know the book by Atul Gawande, Being Mortal, he writes about this particular place. It's called the Leonard Florence Center. My wife and I toured there after running the Boston Marathon. And what was really cool about this place is as you look at it, there is nothing in that picture that would tell you it's a nursing home. Maybe the wheelchair, but we see wheelchairs all over the place these days, right? And so what happened here is that woman in the wheelchair, that's her great grandson, lying on the floor. Who would ever lie on a floor in a nursing home? This is a carpeted and clean environment, and that's his grandmother sitting in the other chair. And you'll notice there those pointy things, those yarn tools or weaving tools. What's the expression? I always forget that. But they might be considered weapons or dangerous in safety, but they're in the environment and nobody's freaking out. No one's going there and saying, "Oh, you got to remove those things because they're too dangerous," and those things in the shelving areas that they're too breakable. Somebody might get hurt. This is a home environment. It's called a greenhouse. 12 people live in a household, and they dine together when they want to dine together, and they choose what they want to eat and how they spend their day. It's totally self-run by the people who live there and people who work there. And by the way, when Barry Berman, the CEO of the Leonard Florence Center, gave us a tour, he had to ring the doorbell on the front door and be let in if they wanted to bring him in. He didn't have a key or anything like that. This was their home, called the greenhouse model. Check it out. The next slide, I want to take you over across the Atlantic to the Netherlands. You probably heard a lot of things about Dementia Village. Everybody talked about it in around 2015. Everyone was buzzing about this, and I got a chance to visit it. And I want to tell you about this particular moment. So most places, most nursing homes or hospitals, they have stores. We call them stores, dry storage. You have them at home too, a dry storage room. You have maybe a storage room for your toiletries, for extra toilet paper, other supplies you have. So we certainly do that. And food, we have all that in Kin Village and all the places I've ever worked. But what we don't have are stores. As someone mentioned already, when you move into a nursing home, we deprive you of things that you are used to doing. It's a human right, for example, to be able to go outside and complain about the weather, especially in Canada. And in BC, when it rains, we want to complain about the weather. I want to put on my rain jacket and feel rain coming down on my waterproof jacket. So, and I like going shopping. I actually love going to Costco. And I love cooking and I love cleaning. Well, maybe not clean so much, but I don't mind doing the dishes. I don't mind doing the lawn. So here's what happens in Dementia Village. This woman who has advanced dementia, she's there with a caregiver, and she's buying the groceries in that store in Dahogaway for the 6-person household that she lives in, or 6-person home. They think anything more than 6 people is an institution. Because in most families, are 6 people, kind of max, right? Some are bigger, some are smaller, but those are all the groceries for her lunch, her dinner, and her breakfast. And by the way, they do make panna cotta and they do eat cheese, but they only have one hot meal a day. It's lunch, sometimes breakfast, but they have a cold dinner. And think about this. This is not the centralized kitchen. This is not centralized laundry. This is not an institution. This is truly a home. So if you want to really make that transformation you're talking about, this is the kind of thing we got to see. If you have a centralized kitchen, I don't think you're ever going to get there. The last slide I want to show you is really the alternative. And it's fortunate or unfortunate that we're not investing enough in long-term care. I know in Ontario, you're investing 60,000 new and replacement beds. That's fantastic. When I speak to my colleagues there, it's not enough. And there's still wait lists. So for whatever reason, if it's ageism or other priorities, we're not putting enough money into this. So the reality is that people are going to be aging in their home, in their community. And that guy sitting on that park bench, you can see his scooter behind him. That's me one day. So this is where I live. I live in that part of Vancouver, Kerrisdale. This is where I grew up. I played hockey there. The McDonald's I went to there. My coffee shop's there. Those green umbrellas are where I buy my produce. And I can tell you right now that we need to be prepared for, as much as possible, living in our homes as long as we might ever expect to, and having the resources we need to do that. And long-term care, by definition, as a gerontologist, I know this, it's not just that facility we talked about. It actually is the whole continuum. I might have spent more than 5 minutes, but I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dan, for painting this picture and sharing all these different models with us. And I think that the key takeaway from what you're sharing is really the idea of homes, and really small person homes. So I think that also is something that Concerned Friends and many of the other panelists have sort of shared a preference and a priority for going forward. So now I'm very pleased, and thank you so much for sharing all of that. I'm very pleased to be able to ask a few questions of the panelists. I know we've spent quite a bit of time, and so I am cognizant of the fact that we may not be able to, again, ask as many. But one question that I did pose to all of the panelists that I think would be really wonderful to hear from you, and I have to now find that one question, is how we can change the perception of long-term care in the minds of the public. So those who don't necessarily live, work, or are directly involved in. There is sort of a prevailing kind of impression of what long-term care is. And so my question to you, and we can go in order if that works, is how do we change this perception? What do we need to do? Sorry, and I can start with Dave and Melissa if you'd like to.
Dave, do you want to kick things off? You're on mute, sorry. Dave, we can't hear you yet. Can I
unmuted myself, sorry.
There we go. No, you're all good.
Senior moment. Getting I think getting the kids in at a young age and seeing what a long-term care home is. It's not just a nursing home anymore. Would go a long way to starting that process.
Yeah, Dave and I spoke yesterday at length about just the importance of language, and I know we still use words like nursing home and facilities, beds, and this language does conjure up that medical or institutional model that the homes were originally built upon. So OARC is committed, and through our resident experience committee, we've been working on a bit of a myth busting campaign to try to having residents identify some of the common stigmas, myths, misconceptions about life in long-term care. And so just, I think we heard from Crystal or from someone earlier saying, I didn't move in to long-term care to die. I came here to live. So having residents quotes also kind of profile to help to kind of demystify and model that things can and must be different. And it really does, change is slow, and it does happen one conversation at a time. And so as Dave mentioned, engaging with students, and part of our work is also engaging with people from all different disciplines, people in nursing, therapeutic recreation, who might be considering a career in long-term care. What we do is so relational. And so it's really important that we get to talk to people, and that really realizing that residents, they're not plucked out of their community, they're still part of the community. So as much of those community linkages that we can help facilitate, promote, celebrate, there's far too many kind of negative stories of long-term care. And it's important to balance that and to celebrate some of the amazing things that are happening. There is so much joy and vibrancy. And, you know, we need to hear from the people that live there. Their perspective, residents and family care partners will have so many wonderful things to say, even in some of the homes where there might not be maybe some not so great reports. It's so much more than the bricks and mortar and these reports kind of documenting one point in time. It's really important just to have those conversations.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave and Melissa. Sam?
Definitely echo what Dave and Melissa have said, and we've had these conversations many times, OARC and FCO folks. So I'd say what immediately came to my mind is there is a bit of a chicken and egg tension, where we do want to talk about long-term care, but it does need a lot of help to be a much better system. There are wonderful things that happen, and I think we need to talk about those with a view to spread and scale those really successful examples of living well in long-term care, of long-term care homes being vibrant communities. But I also think it's part of a broader societal issue in terms of how we talk about older adults, and how older adults have voices in talking about healthcare, long-term care, whether it's, you know, home care or whatnot. Is, I think, we as a society need to just transform how we view older adults, how we view healthcare and the caring profession, and, you know, exposure at a younger age about long-term care, about aging, that can really transform people's opinions. Maybe it changes their career path, their life trajectory, how they engage in democracy, what their viewpoints are there. Because I do think that it is part of a larger puzzle, so to speak, but also we can't forget the impacts of other socioeconomic issues on long-term care, and how sort of the complex interplay. Many frontline workers are racialized women who have a lot else going on in their lives, and that may impact their view of their work, but also how they talk about their work outside with their peers and their communities. So I think we need to look at, you know, from an equity perspective of making sure it's a good place to work so that we can brag about it, and also media, and ensuring that as a society we're, quite frankly, less ageist, and that we make space for the viewpoints that older adults, who don't all agree on things, but all those various viewpoints, I think we need to pay more attention to.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sam. Crystal?
Yeah, so I love the comments that have already been made. And I think that, you know, we actually already have a captive audience of the community, because our family members, our volunteers, and our staff are vibrant members of the community outside of the out of the home. And so I think if we can find ways to help them get excited about what's happening inside long-term care, then they're going to share that to their friends in the community. You know, we have some families that are involved, but unfortunately, a lot of families are dealing with, you know, maybe aging health themselves, or children at home or, just a busy lifestyle. So finding ways to help families to be more engaged. And like Sam said at the beginning, caring for the caregiver, because that's going to go a long way out in the community to let the community know, hey, you know what, they really care in there, and start to change that perception. And I think the other piece is helping staff have more opportunities to learn who the person is they're caring for. Maybe mentorship opportunities for the residents to be able to mentor staff and maybe give them some tips on lived experience that they have, and just building those types of relationships so that coming to work is a lot more interesting than just getting the job done. Because our staff are really busy, right? They're all running around. They're all very task oriented. So giving them opportunity to see who that person is, I think would help that community perception too.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Sara?
I agree with everything that's been said as well. So without kind of repeating a lot of what's been said, I think there could be a focus on utilizing the tools of today, which is social media, to kind of get out there what we're seeing. We see a lot of negativity when we're talking. Very much like Sam said, you need your workers and your staff to be on board and want to come out and say positive things about their work. So I think that's very, very important. And same with families. But there's a lot of good that happens, and especially with recreation, feel these positive things. And I know our recreation staff, oftentimes we've made videos, and we go back to them every year. We did one video where it was I Got the Feeling song, and all the residents are dancing and they're lip syncing and you see the joy, like the pure joy in them. And then you put that out, and the response we got from social media about how wonderful it was to see people living in long-term care, having fun, all ages, enjoying it, or going in thinking, because we've had residents or individuals move in and they're like, hey, this isn't what I thought it was. Like, I do more here than I did in retirement. I'm engaged, I have friends, I have activities to do, I have meaning, and they come and they're actually pleasantly surprised. But we don't share that the same we do as negative aspects. And I think that's where you can utilize that social media of today to kind of portray that to the community.
Thank you, Sara. Thank you for that. Dan?
I just typed in on Google, my other computer, I typed in positive news stories and about long-term care. And on Google, there are almost 7 million. And let me just give me a second. I'm going to type in negative and see how many there are there. And let's see what we get. I can spell negative. Negative, there are, negative news stories, long-term care. There are under 4,000. There you go. So there's almost maybe two, how's my math? Anyways, there are lots more positive stories than there are negative in Google. But I think that's what we have to do, is tell those stories, tell the positive stories, shine a spotlight positively on PSWs, shine the spotlight positive on all the things possible that you can come up with related to long-term care, and inspire others. It helps get people to want to work in the field, to volunteer, to if they had to choose to live there, especially the ones that are shining examples of the qualities that you're all concerned about. And also it helps to value those places so that we don't have people thinking other priorities are more important. When I look at the area where I grew up, the high school that my wife went to and our kids went to and I went to, all those high schools now have been completely redone and seismically upgraded, brand new buildings. But the nursing home where my dad worked and my grandparents lived, it's the same place it's always been. So we got to make sure that we make this a positive story so that government and the public wants to invest in it. And that things like the housing announcements that we heard yesterday from our federal government, we want to see that money come to long-term care so we can build even more and have more supports for older people. So my suggestion is just keep on telling the positive stories and represent all the good stuff that's going on. And the important work that you're doing in advocacy, I think it's critically important to give, because you have the voice and you're speaking on behalf of those who can't. So I encourage you to be as vocal and loud as you can. And by the way, the second news story that comes up under positive, if you do the same search as me, if your Google engine works exact same as mine, it's by the Grey Panthers comes up. And the Grey Panthers, check them out. They're a similar organization to you. Many of their members come from, I think the guy who's head of it, his background is a Teamster. That gives you any idea. And they were one of the a beginning kind of revolutionaries trying to change the way we look at older adults.
Thank you, Dan. That's wonderful. And thank you for that Google search, because that is very uplifting from my perspective to hear that. So I think the message is well received. I have a few more questions to direct to each of you individually. And I know we are getting close to the end, so I think we'll have time for just one more each, if that's okay. So I guess first to Dave and Melissa, one of the questions that came through was just around providing any guidance or tips on how to navigate the transition into a long-term care home. And did you have anything maybe that you would want to share?
Well, I can only speak from my own experience here at Kensington, but there is a welcome kit that was put together by the organization, which goes through all the details and things that people need to know when meals are served, for example, and what's all out of bounds and what isn't, that kind of thing. And then there's a personal interaction. As a member of the Residents' Council, I make it my duty to go and meet every new person the day that they come in, because it's a shock. Even though all they're doing is changing addresses and essentially life continues on, it's a bit of a shock. So transitioning from outside to inside is critical in those first few days.
Well said, Dave. I think the only thing I would add, just the value of that peer support, and to really encourage opportunities for the new resident and the family care partners to take advantage of the councils that exist in the home. I've heard from some of our residents, being able to be embraced by someone who's been through it, knows the ropes. You could have as much loving, welcoming support from the team. It's just hits different when it comes from someone who lives in the home or someone who's been a supportive partner of a resident who's transitioned to the home. And so I know Sam and I, we've talked with some of the Ontario health teams about also how can we let people know that these councils exist before they really do that move to long-term care. And I really, as a promising practice, I'm so pleased when I hear that residents and family care partners are part of the tours when someone goes to visit a home, a prospective home, how important it is to have a touch point, whether it's a family member touring on behalf of a loved one or a resident looking at options for themselves, to be able to say, okay, can I talk to someone on a representative of the resident council? Because you're going to get the straight goods there. You know, what's working well, what are some of the real and honest challenges, but just knowing that you've got an ally, and these residents and families can be real champions. And it's so important to kind of leverage. And so if it's not offered, make sure you ask. I'd love to talk to somebody who's been through it. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Those are great suggestions, and also something to think about as we envision sort of the future and how we need to support the transition. Sam, I'm wondering if you have any tips to engage families in family councils and advocacy, and if you could share your thoughts on that.
Could spend hours talking about that, but in brief, I think we need to, homes need to set the conditions for success. So in Ontario, we have legislation where home licensees have certain duties with regards to the family council. And that's great. Those powers are really important to support the existence of a council, but existence isn't enough. Council should be something that families, and I'm using family in the broadest term possible, so anyone who's really important to a resident plays a role in that person's life, the environment should be one where they really want to be involved. So what do I mean by that? I mean that, like Melissa said, caregivers, family care partners know what to expect coming into long-term care. They've got the information beforehand so that they're not walking into this new scary reality with not knowing what at all to expect. They need to understand the realities of long-term care. Often expectations are here, reality's a little bit closer to here. Families need to know what to expect in long-term care. It's not one-on-one 24/7 care, but if people are there because they require that care, and there's ways to make it wonderful. So the information, they need support during the transition, because that emotional transition is very challenging. So access to social workers, to peer support through the family council, through other peer support means. For example, Kipling Acres City of Toronto Home has a new family support group that they developed in collaboration with the family council to provide some of that support families need. Councils need to be well run, so supporting council leaders to understand how to run effective groups that provide safe and brave spaces to discuss issues. And home leadership plays such an important role. And, you know, I get that home leaders are juggling a million things, that they have responsibility for compliance, for everything that happens there. And the idea of maybe giving up a bit of control, maybe throwing back the curtain to some of the good, the bad, and the challenging is terrifying. But excellent home leaders, staff, administrators who see families as allies and who can say, this home isn't perfect, we're trying, we would love for you and the council to come on this journey to excellence with us, and who see them as groups and people who can bring their lived professional experience to support better. That's where family councils can then advocate for better, for quality improvement at a home level, for organizing through networks. I saw one of the Ottawa network folks is on the call with us today, where they can organize, they can advocate. So we need to set the conditions for success, and then the magic happens. But it's got to be a good thing people want to come to, and we need to enable them to be successful.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Sam. And I do appreciate that from as someone who has had a family member in care. It's great to hear some of these sort of strategies and a direction that you're proposing. Crystal, I was hoping that you might be able to share some activities that families and care partners can do at home or in a long-term care home environment to provide more enrichment to those who are living there.
Sure, that's right up my alley. So there are so many great resources out there, but the first thing I think I have to say is keep yourself healthy, both mentally and physically, because you can't care for someone else if you're feeling, down and tired and physically exhausted. And so that goes for the same with the loved one that you're caring for. When you come to visit, maybe take them outside for 5 minutes, get some fresh air. They need it as much as you do. Stay mentally active with them, play a game, look for some memory recall games, puzzles. Routines and repetitive tasks are really great things for people. They know what to expect when you're coming. They know when you're coming, if you're coming on a routine, regular basis. And look for some resources. So the Dementiability website has some excellent resources that are free, downloadable books, downloadable games, and they come at different levels of cognitive ability. So they kind of have a low, medium, and high functioning tabs that you can get different types of activities. The other website that's really good is Therapeutic Rec Ontario, and under their resources tab, they have dementia inclusive choices for exercise, and there's a whole handbook there that kind of gives you some information on how to stay physically active. And then the Alzheimer's Society has so many great resources on their website too. So, we don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time. You know, we can just look at for some of the resources that are out there and available to us, and then tweak them to meet the needs of our specific person that we're caring for. You could, just to give you, you know, a little example of a game, you know, you could take a deck of cards and you could sort the colors. Pretty simple, right? 2 colors, you're sorting them. Then you could, if that's too easy, you could just sort the numbers. And then that's too easy, you could sort the different suits. And then if that's too easy, you probably should be playing a card game with them. So there's, you know, things that you can do to start low and build on skills without making people feel intimidated. I think one of my biggest messages would be to start slow, because we want people to be successful at activities. And if they're failing at the activity, they're probably going to give up. So start, you know, low and then build up the skill level so that you get to that point where you're challenging them, but not to the point of frustration.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Crystal. Sara, how can we ensure that special needs related to specific diagnoses are met in long-term care homes? What are some thoughts on that?
For this, I would say utilize your interdisciplinary teams. Get to know, so as a family member, you're going to, or as an individual living there, facilitate who you can talk to. So most homes have nursing coordinators, directors of care, assistant director of care, somebody that could kind of facilitate what you need is and who you need to talk to. So for instance, in our home, we would use our nursing coordinator, and then we have multi-disciplinary teams within the home. So for instance, just as an avenue, if somebody was having some kind of depression or responsive behavior, then I'll refer to the DSO embedded team. And then we do assessments from there, and then we can resource based on our diagnosis to either, we have a lot of outsourced resources. So each team has their own way to kind of facilitate where you need and where we can get those resources. So we have like regional psychogeriatrics, we have the behavioral response team, we have outsourced for pain. If there's something we can't control within the home with our physicians, we can outsource and have assessments into the home. You just kind of have to, so that's where you would talk to your nursing coordinator, who can then relate it to somebody within the home to see where we can get those resources. There is so many resources that we have. It's just figuring out which ones we need, and there is so many people within the home that can help facilitate that. You just have to advocate, and unfortunately that's how it is you normally have to speak up and say, hey, my loved one needs this, or I need this.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Sara. So Dan, you painted a really wonderful picture of the models, the smaller homes, and that this is sort of the model that we should be striving toward. And so I guess my question for you, it's a big one, but how do we start working toward smaller homes? How do we manage to move toward this type of model?
Well, I would encourage you to connect with people at the greenhouse. There aren't any greenhouses yet in Canada. I know we talk about it and think about it. Just like we saw in, I think it was the Peel region, where we saw the embracing of butterfly. And I know that other care communities in Ontario are looking at the butterfly model. So be inviting them to do maybe a seminar and invite a webinar, invite as many families as possible, invite the sites if possible. Perhaps try to get them on the agenda at the Ontario Long-Term Care Association and Advantage conference and the other conferences that go on, and really promote that. Maybe even do a position paper from families. I can tell you that from British Columbia's viewpoint, the voice of the families hasn't been heard, and your voice as family members are so critical, because you're the voice for people who live in care, who can't express themselves. Some can, but those who can, like Dave and others, get them out there. And I would just say that this is what you expect. As those places are being built in Ontario, when you're building hundreds of people living under kind of one roof, unless they are individualized, really separated households within that area, and they don't have centralization of services, it is going to be institution. So no one wants to live in an institution; they want to live in a home. So I would just do your best to advocate for that. Is there anything I can do myself to encourage that? I'd be happy to do that with you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I see that actually, Sam, you have put into the chat that there is a Lunch and Learn webinar on the greenhouse model that CARP Ottawa is going to be hosting. So thank you for sharing, Dan, your perspective on that, and as well, Sam, the additional kind of resource. I am very cognizant of the fact that we are at time. And so I want to express my gratitude for to our panelists for being so generous with your visions, with your time, just, you know, with being here in community with all of us tonight. I also want to acknowledge the volunteers and the people behind the scenes who have helped to kind of coordinate and pull this together, as well as the wonderful attendees who are here tonight and anyone who might be watching this as a recording. We're often asked in terms of Long-Term Care Awareness Day, how do people get involved? How can people support this? Please spread the word about it and take action. The website concernedfriends.ca/LTCAD is where you can find lots of great sort of suggestions, whether it's sending a message to your MPP, whether it is just sharing within your networks. I mean, we talked a lot about sharing as part of the strategies tonight. And for sure, for those who are either directly a part of the Concerned Friends community or who are not yet, please join our community. Please, you know, stay in the loop with us so that we can continue to sort of amplify and create more critical mass around the importance of long-term care and the future of it. Finally, as I wrap up here, I do want to say that we are inviting your feedback and input for any future webinars and just based on this experience. So I'm going to ask Carol maybe to put the link in the chat in case you exit this session without being able to do it in the browser, but you will be prompted to just share a few thoughts. And we would be so grateful to you if you did do that, so that we can learn and we can build on what we've done tonight. And we look forward to reporting back on all these wonderful aspirational visions and the ideas that came out. And so look for some communication from us in the future. And I thank you very much and wish you a wonderful night.